Take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So I watched Tim Dillon. He did an interview with CNN. It was like a big interview with Elle Reeve, who I believe has interviewed other like cultural figures. I don't know if she has like huge interviews with politicians, but I've definitely seen her around. And she's a good journalist. But she seems to be good at asking, you know, good questions that get to the heart of the sort of like poison of society. And I think this conversation was interesting, but I just wanted to bring it up because Tim Dillon comes off as so uniquely like evil in this interview. And I don't know, I thought it was funny. I know there's other things to talk about, but I was entertained by how just dodgy and sort of insidious he comes off as in this interview, because I don't always get that impression from him. And I've said before that like I like his comedy. He's a comedian, for those who don't know. And you know, I think he says interesting things from time to time, and he's relatively funny, but I've never got quite the dark vibe that I got from him during this interview. It's kind of just, he just comes off as a little bit soulless, and the way he obfuscates every question, it's very politician-like. For somebody who is so critical of politicians and fancies themselves as somebody who, you know, calls out politicians for being fake, he gives very political answers in this interview, to the extent that I could see him doing politics because of the way that he was answering these questions. Now, to be fair, it was an interview with CNN, so he probably knew that no matter how disarming this interviewer was, which she is quite disarming, that's her like that's her tactic interview-wise. So he probably just had his defenses up and was trying not to say anything that they would take out of context. But still, he just ends up coming off like incredibly calculated, to the point where it just seems like what he's saying doesn't really mean anything at all. And I just thought it was interesting, because they do get into some subjects about him platforming Steve Bannon and JD Vance, and I think that his answers there are definitely like informative about how the sort of grifter class of commentators works.
So to hang this defeat all on a few podcasts and to say that they were the problem, I just don't buy the narrative. So I don't think I'm a new establishment. If you weigh, again, a few comedians with podcasts versus all of the people that supported Kamala Harris, you know, Democrat donors, billionaires, big people.
I guess like new establishment is kind of a term of art within old media, and maybe I'm not using that in a clear way, but it's like, this is the place to go to address Americans.
I certainly think it's becoming a place, and it should be a place, that a candidate should sit for a 2-hour interview with Joe Rogan. Why not?
But not just a candidate. Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, Elon.
Sure. They should do that.
I mean, don't tell me that's not interesting. It's interesting.
It's very interesting.
Okay,
I
so
think technology is very interesting.
What do you think of those tech people then?
I worry about them. I don't trust any of them,
I was
actually.
I was on the Reddit.
I don't trust any of them. I think a lot of people elected Donald Trump hoping that we were not going to continue foreign wars and spending American money for foreign wars. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, this is the whole thing. Everybody campaigns on a laundry list of things they're going to do, and are they going to do them, and are they going to listen? I mean, it's a great question.
Does anyone ever back channel with you?
I think there's people that are frustrated. I don't think it's a monolith. I think in a presidential administration, you have people that feel very differently. This is all being publicized right now over tariffs. Yeah. The people that felt differently about tariffs, about, you know, all kinds of things. Do I talk to certain people? Sure. Well, wait a minute. Why didn't you suss out every single thing that JD Vance does or doesn't believe? JD Vance articulated a broad version of what he believed on the show, in the same way that I've heard Kamala Harris and all these people articulate a broad version of what they believe, and then they go into office and then they do whatever they want to do, or whatever the donors want, or if they have integrity, they do some of what they say. And again, is the responsibility on a podcaster to judge the integrity of someone they've met in an hour? or to, I don't know. I think you should have a healthy degree of skepticism, but you're not the coolest people in the world. I don't think, and the tech guys, when they go on Joe, it's like sad.
So why have him on your comedy show?
What?
So why have him on your comedy show?
Well, because it's very interesting to talk to somebody who might be the vice president. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do that? You know, like, I mean, there doesn't seem to be a good reason.
Because he might use you to further his own ends, perhaps even ends that you don't agree with.
Yeah, but I think that's everybody that goes on any show is using that platform to get a message out that you may or may not agree with. I don't think the whole point of having a podcast is to talk to people whom you may or may not agree with. Is he Trojan horsing all of this stuff so that he can go in there and like run a really race-based thing? Everything he said was kind of about class.
It was, yeah.
So again, it's a hard question to ask, right? Like, what's in his...
I know.
Right, and it's a difficult thing to know.
It's the kind of question I have to ask.
Yeah.
My job question.
I agree.
Yeah, so she's kind of pressing him here to get to the bottom of the fact that, like, he and the rest of these podcasters, they're pretty careless with their commentary in general, but especially when it comes to having certain politicians on their platform, they're just very blasé about it, and it does lead to them getting used, and she's trying to help him connect that, and I think he's just willfully ignoring it. And the main thing here for these guys, while I do think there's some maliciousness involved, you know, they want to talk to people that are salacious and are going to get like a lot of attention on them, and in some cases I think they want to align with those people. Tim Dillon is a friend of RFK Jr. He's talked about that extensively, and he seems to, you know, buy into that worldview at least a little bit. And so, you know, there's definitely some desired affiliation with the sort of Trump camp when it comes to a guy like Tim Dillon or Joe Rogan. They obviously want to be in the club, but also I think it's just easier for them to not do the work of an interview. It's easier for them to just talk and kind of treat everybody on even footing, which, you know, is fair for the most part, except for the fact that having a serious conversation with a politician specifically, or somebody who's making like serious medical claims or something like that, it just requires a high level of scrutiny, and these podcasters just don't want to apply that. That's partially because it would make their environments more hostile seeming, and it's partially because it's more work for them. And so she's trying to point this out to him, and she's being a little too, I think she maybe could have been more forceful here. I think her interview tactic is to be very friendly. She doesn't want, you know, a guy like him to feel like she's attacking him or trying to find a bad angle. So she kind of takes more of a like, let's talk through this, let's get to the bottom of it kind of angle. And I don't know, I think it's maybe a little bit too light, but I can understand why she didn't want to push too hard. And she got some good things out of him, but it's the same thing where it's kind of like you lightly push somebody and then you just sort of let them spin and spin. And as she's making that point to him, he's kind of doing the same thing to her. I just think she has more awareness about it and is directing the conversation a little bit more. She's pressing on certain things, like trying to get him to, you know, recognize that a politician like JD Vance or Steve Bannon might be trying to use you. They might be lying to you in a way that you are trying to ignore. And he even mentions in this podcast, upon being asked, that, you know, he's frustrated with where the administration is at in terms of war. You know, we're threatening war with Iran and we're posturing war with all of these different countries. And he makes the point that that's not what JD Vance told him. That's not what he, you know, expected from this administration. And what it comes down to is that he believed what they told him. He had JD Vance on his platform, and he even says here, he told me what he quote unquote believes, and I believed him. I took it at face value. And now that they're doing something I don't like, I'm gonna be critical of that, and I'm gonna say I don't agree with this because I'm just real. That's just me. I'm just real like that. So after I have him on my platform to thousands of people kind of legitimize this platform without asking any serious questions, then he wins. Then now I'm going to be critical because I'm just a real one. So that's kind of his point here. And she doesn't quite take it all the way in terms of pointing out to him that he had a responsibility to press harder about those things in the moment. And look, it's his platform. He can or can't do that if he doesn't want to, you know? It's up to him. It's up to Joe Rogan. If they want to have a friendlier platform towards everybody, or just towards right-wing politicians or whatever, they can do that. And what he says, and Joe Rogan has said this as well, is that like they reach out to politicians and whatnot. Like he says he reached out to Tim Walz, didn't get an answer. I think he said Bernie Sanders as well, didn't get an answer. And so that's obviously, you know, staffers of Bernie's or of probably the Kamala Harris campaign at that time. So it's pretty obvious based on what we know now why the Kamala Harris campaign would be keeping Walz from doing that, because they were very skittish in general. Maybe he should have done an interview like that. Would Tim Dillon have been equally forgiving and uncritical in an interview like that with Kamala Harris or Tim Walz? Probably not. I mean, probably to a relative degree, but these guys clearly just have a sense that the maliciousness of Democratic politicians is worse for them. It's more of a concern. And so the open maliciousness of Trump and the Republicans, to them, I think they sort of relate to it a little bit. I don't want to say they. I'm just getting that malicious vibe from Tim Dillon specifically in this interview. So I think maybe him, you know, Andrew Schultz, people who have commented to the effect that they kind of enjoy reveling in the maliciousness. They like the meanness. They like that we have taken this sort of cultural mask off and decided to stop being so sensitive in terms of being mean as a person or mean as a nation. And so they get something out of that, at least to a degree. And that's why they drift towards a more malicious form of politics, even though the whole time they kind of throw up their hands and say, hey, I'm just being even-footed and I'm just having anybody on my platform who will talk to me. But at the end of the day, the reason they're not more critical of the maliciousness is because that sort of appeals to them, or at least they have removed the pretense that might have once been there, that maliciousness is a bad thing. And so that's another thing that Elle Reeve is kind of trying to point to about like somebody like Steve Bannon or something, is that like he has a past of being racist. He's a racially divisive figure. And so when Tim Dillon is saying, well, I didn't see anything like that in his rhetoric, and he was mostly talking about class. And you know, I think in that case specifically, it's a willful lack of critical thinking, because he knows very well, like, what the process of deduction is that would lead you to the conclusion that Steve Bannon is, you know, wants racist political ends, even if some of the things about him don't necessarily align with that. But, you know, a lot of these guys, like, don't seem to have been paying that much attention for that long. And I've noticed that a lot of people's opinions on Trump seem all just based on recent information, and there's not really that deep rooted of an idea of like how, you know, we got to this situation from the beginning of Trump getting into politics. So, you know, it's just an amnesia, and it's just kind of a willful ignorance that allows people to get spun. And yeah, she's trying to point that out to him in this interview, and he's allergic to hearing it, obviously, because, you know, it's become part of what he does. But I was just impressed at how shameless he came off in this interview and how dodgy he is. And his cynicism is, I think, a very honest version of what the rest of the podcasters in that sort of sphere think, which is that they have the opportunity. You know, politicians like Donald Trump and stuff want to come on their podcast. Why wouldn't they have them? Why wouldn't you have that conversation? And, you know, I think that's just how they think. They don't have to do more work than that. And the journalist even mentions that, like, it's a little frustrating for her as a journalist because they have to do the work. It's part of their job. They have to know their shit going into the interview, and they have to ask hard and uncomfortable questions during the interview. It's not enough to just be like, oh, that was a nice conversation that I had with, you know, Satan Jr. Like, you have to ask Satan Jr. hard questions because it's Satan Jr. And ultimately, there's things to ask that person that will be interesting, but you have to crack those things open, and sometimes you have to have a contentious conversation with them. And so The other funny thing that gets kind of breezed over there is that he back channels with some members of the Trump administration. So who could that be? I don't know. It's got to be somebody kind of high up, though. It's somebody in some kind of inner circle. And there's some reference made to JD Vance during that part of the conversation. So I don't know if he has that type of access. But to play dumb about this idea that you're the new establishment, like, oh, what, a bunch of podcasters are the new establishment, and then you're saying that you have back channels with members of the administration. He's probably talking about RFK Jr. now that I think about it, because he's talked about how he's close with him. So yeah, I mean, it's like, just they know what they're doing. It's clearly insidious. It's never been as clearly insidious to me as it is watching him on CNN. And maybe that's just because he was uncomfortable and defensive, but I don't know. You can just kind of see the maliciousness, and I did find that entertaining, I have to be honest. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting different kinds of stuff there, like podcasts that don't make it to the main channel, book reviews, movie reviews, also music. If you like the music that plays in the back of these podcasts, all that's going to be posted there, as well as my EPs. I just dropped a new EP called Dead Internet Theory, which is now available on all platforms, but it was available first for members only. So if you want early access to future music and projects like that, become a member. And if there's other stuff that you would like to see as members only content, let me know and we'll figure some things out.